Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Rachel Patton, Executive Director of Preserve Arkansas. Preserve Arkansas is the statewide nonprofit advocate for historic preservation. Welcome to Women in Preservation, our series that features women who are working to save historic places. Many thanks to our series sponsor, DMX Architecture of Fayetteville, for their generous support of women in preservation. Many of you are already members of Preserve Arkansas, and we thank you for your support. If you're not yet a member, I'd encourage you to join us. Your membership provides vital support to our organization and allows us to continue the important work of saving Arkansas's historic places. Learn more and join at preservearkansas.org. Join us again for Women in Preservation on Tuesday, June the 10th for a talk by Talisha Richardson, former executive director of 646 Downtown in Fort Smith. Talisha is well known for her enthusiasm about downtown Fort Smith. She recently expanded her journey into the private practice setting of mental health therapy and business consulting. And now, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Melissa Harlan. Jonesboro, Arkansas native Melissa Harlan has over 20 years of experience designing and documenting projects of varying type, scale, and complexity for nonprofits, Fortune 500 companies, the U.S. government, and residential clients. She brings rigorous technical skills together with thoughtful design thinking to create spaces that enhance the human experience and contribute positively to the communities in which they exist. Her current work with Kiku Obata includes historic adaptive reuse projects in Alton, Illinois. Melissa holds a Master of Architecture from Harvard's Graduate School of Design, Bachelor of Architecture from the University of Arkansas, and Bachelor of Science in Agriculture from Arkansas State University. Melissa served on the jury for the 2020 AIA Gold Medal and AIA Firm of the Year. That same year, she juried the AIA Small Project Grant and chaired the AIA Small Project Design Awards. She is AIA St. Louis President, founding member of AIA St. Louis JEDI Committee, past member of the AIA Missouri Board of Directors, past chair of the AIA Small Project Design Knowledge Community, and past president of the Fay Jones School of Architecture and Design Professional Advisory Board at the University of Arkansas. Her greatest project is motherhood. I love that. I hope you had a great Mother's Day, Melissa. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, Rachel. That was a very kind introduction. And thank you for asking me to share my work in Alton with Preserve Arkansas.
Thank you for
So,
speaking.
so I grew up, let's see, there we go. I grew up in Jonesboro, like Rachel said, where Citizens Bank was the tallest building in town. And just down the street, the Kate House was a marvel to, a young, budding architecture mind. My dad built our house when I was 4 and 5 years old. So watching that happen while I played in the woods and built caterpillar enclosures out of 2x4 offcuts certainly had an impact on my young mind. And unfortunately, I think the Citizens Bank building is soon to be demolished if it hasn't already, which is pretty sad for Jonesboro. Jonesboro, I'm sure many of you know, sits on Crowley's Ridge and spills out into the Mississippi alluvial plain where soybeans, rice, and cotton are grown. The flooded rice fields make the mosquitoes unbearable in summer. But then there's nice things like the cotton snow that lines the roads in late summer and early fall, and the agrarian buildings like this one, the silos and farmsteads that continue to fascinate me. This one is a picture I took driving down from St. Louis to Jonesboro to see my family. I always pass this house, and probably every other time I pass it, I have to stop and take a photo of it. So I drew many, many houses as a kid, but I took a left turn when it came time for college. My dad likes to say that we're slow learners. So going away to college wasn't really an option. So I stayed at Arkansas State and tried out a string of majors, um, eventually graduating with an agriculture degree. From there, I went to University of Arkansas to study architecture. And thanks to student loans, I was able to do study abroad in Rome and also a trip to Peru, which you see here. And Dr. Goodstein crammed my head full of architecture history, so much so that I left with a minor in it. I worked for a few years in St. Louis after finishing with my BArch, and that included some time at Kiko Obata before going to graduate school at Harvard, where I was able to study the Frank House in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, designed by Gropius and Breuer, and design a visitor center for it. And then also study the mid-century residential development Six Moon Hill by the Architects Collaborative in Lexington, Massachusetts. That was before it was on the National Register. And I was able to sit down and talk with Sarah Harkness about their work there and what it was like to raise a family there. So after I finished at Harvard, I started working for Office Daw in Boston and Monica Ponce de Leon's studio in Ann Arbor. When I was with Kiku's office, the first time around, I worked on a renovation of the Southeast Missourian newspaper building in Cape Girardeau, Missouri. And then when I was with Office Daw, I worked on a renovation in addition to a historic building on the University of Toronto campus that housed the architecture school there. So those were two sort of earlier historic projects that I worked on professionally. And then eventually moved back to St. Louis, started working for Christner Architects, and was able to work on this project, the Rung for Women headquarters, which is in Fox Park in the city of St. Louis, and was an old manufacturing building that we renovated and then did an addition to. Oh, what just happened? Okay. Nope, skipped one. There we go. So in 2019, I returned to working with Kiku. They lured me back with the promise of work on historic buildings in downtown Alton and being a part of a team that would sort of help to transform that downtown. And being able to impact a small town and impact a downtown like that was very interesting to me, especially having come off the Run project, which really sort of relit my interest in historic buildings. So Alton is about 40 minutes due north of downtown St. Louis, at a bend in the Mississippi River between the confluences with the Missouri River and the Illinois River. And it's part of the Metro North. It is an especially beautiful portion of the Mississippi above the Melvin Price Lock and Dam, which makes the river very different from what we experience down in Arkansas. So it's a much slower river here, and there's a lot more recreational boating on the river. So Alton is across the river from the upper Mississippi waterfowl area and the Riverlands Audubon Center, where migratory birds rest, and downriver from dramatic limestone cliffs along the Great River Road, where in the winter you have a lot of people who come to see the bald eagles nesting. So Alton's downtown, like many downtowns along the Mississippi, is cut off from the river by transportation and industry. So in between downtown Alton, which you see here, There's a 4-lane highway and 4 sets of train tracks, and a mill and a casino, and a lumber yard. So you kind of have to get across there to have that connection. And this is another view similar to that first one that shows the idea for the downtown. So there's the entertainment district, which is on the west side. And there is the historic Grand Theater and the Stratford Hotel that sort of anchor that area. Down on the east end is the Wedge Innovation District. And that's anchored by the Wedge Building, which we'll talk about, and the Jacoby Furniture Building. And then in between along Broadway is what we call the Broadway Makers District. And these are some images of the Grand Theater, the Stratford Hotel, and the Jacoby Building. Before the pandemic hit us, we were very close to inking a deal with a live music promoter who was going to help us transform the Grand into a live music video that would then follow up with the Stratford being reimagined, but as a boutique hotel. But the pandemic sort of, took the wind out of the live music scene, and that had to go on hold. So we shifted our view down the street to the Innovation District and started working on the Wedge. So the people who are making all of this happen are Alton Works, which is a social impact redevelopment company that's focused on the revitalization of the downtown. And it's really the brainchild of attorney John Simmons and his wife Jane, who want Alton to be a place that their grandchildren want to stay. So Alton Works is working to stabilize the properties they own and refresh or renovate them. Our first project with them was Flock, which is a food truck park and bar that transformed an old machine shop into a vibrant business that supports local food entrepreneurs. And you can sort of see some of that before and transformation of it here. Alton Works is also working with Lasse Sorensen, a chef who has a PBS program called Food is Love, to sort of reimagine Alton as a culinary destination. So very excited about what they're doing with him as well. So a little more about the Jacoby Arts and Innovation District. You can see an aerial drawing here that shows the Wedge, which is the project we're going to talk about, in relationship to the Jacoby Building and Lucas Row. The Wedge sits at the intersection of Broadway and 3rd Street and is a beautiful flatiron building that had been, really transformed over the years by additions and renovations. And here you can see it from a street view, another sketch that shows sort of the vision for making this area more vibrant and renovating these beautiful historic buildings. So one thing about Alton, if you've never been there, is from the river, the topography is very much uphill from the river into the downtown and beyond into the town. So if you're right on the river, you have a great view. If you're a block up, you're enough higher than those other buildings that you have a great view, and so on and so on. So one of the thoughts is that Alton should really be a city of rooftops where you can enjoy and take in the views of the river from the rooftops, which is not something that you've been able to do until this building opened. And, one thing about being on this roof on a clear day, you can see the St. Louis Arch on the horizon, just 18 miles due south. So let's get into the Wedge building. It's really comprised of 4 different buildings. So Alton Bank and Trust Building is the sort of Flatiron building at the corner of Broadway and Third that was built in 1904. The Wedge Bank addition was built in 1951, and it replaced a building from the 1800s that we'll see in some historic photos that was really beautiful. And then next to it is Weigler Hall, which was built in 1863. And then behind that is the Elfkin Building, which the first, second, and third floors were built in 1949, and then a 4th floor was added in 1954. So over in the Alton Baking and Trust Building, we have cast iron columns. There's heavy timber framing in the basement. In the Wedge Bank addition, we have bar joists and concrete on top of expanded metal decking. The Weigler Hall building is, load-bearing masonry and 2x framing. And then the Elfkin building is a steel structure. So a lot of different construction types, a lot of different eras that things were built, and so challenging just in navigating all of the structure. And then of note, there was a fire in the Elfkin building in 1989, so there was a pretty big renovation around that time. And the Wedge Bank was also renovated in 1968. So a lot of history there. So here are some images of the buildings. The image on the left, upper left, is of Weigler Hall. This one dates from 1948. So it's before that 1949 renovation and sort of swallowing up of the facade. So this is what it looked like when it was Weigler Hall. And then the upper right is what it looks like or looked like when we got a hold of it. So the 1950s building sort of swallowed up the 1863 building. And then in the lower left, you can see it sort of mid transformation. So over on the right of this photo, you can see the old Weigler Hall facade. And then in the middle, they've transformed this lower storefront with a 4x4 ceramic tile wainscot with vitrolite panels above and an aluminum sort of eyebrow that separates the storefront from the upper floors. And you can see how they've transformed these windows. They've added a layer of brick to the building, and they've added these casement windows. And then over to the left in that photo, you can see they've switched out the windows. They've filled in the upper portion, and they're rectilinear windows now. And it looks like they've put on some tar as waterproofing, and they're getting ready to put on the tile and vitrolite on this portion. So that's a really interesting photo where you can see it, the sort of how it's progressing there. In the middle bottom photo, this is a typical interior hallway in the Elfkin building. And the interior hallways, because they're public parts of the building, we needed to maintain those. And then this in the lower right is a photo where you can see the Elfkin building with its added fourth floor. And then to the right in that photo where it steps down, that's the swallowed up Weigler Hall. And then these photos are of the Alton Banking and Trust building. So the photo on the left is from 1936. You can see the Weigler Hall facade in the background and that 1800s building in the middle between Weigler Hall and the Alton Banking and Trust building. And then you can see it, the photo on the right is from 1953. And you can see that middle building is gone and the wedge addition is in the middle, and you can see that Weigler Hall has been swallowed up there with a mid-century facade. And you can also see here on the Flatiron, they've covered over and sort of expanded the building out to encapsulate those columns at entry, and they've put in a display window. And then these photos were from around 2019, most of them. And you can see in the lower right that at some point they took out that display window on the Flatiron and they added a walk-up teller window. And then the clock must have stopped working and they added this giant sort of cartoonish clock over the front of it, which also stopped working. So there's some interior images. You can see the bank lobby, the mid-century bank lobby here in the upper left, some sort of typical interior conditions in the lower left. And then this middle bottom photo is in the basement. And something to note on the vault door is you can sort of see the water line of, a foot or more of water that was typically hanging out in this basement. And then the upper right photo is during construction, where they had taken off the big oversized clock. They had demolished the teller window, and we were very happy to see that those columns were still in there. And the door surround was still mostly intact, but enough of it had been knocked off and in order to do their renovations that we had to basically use what was there as a guide to recreate that door surround. And then all of the windows have been taken out. The windows you can see in the lower right are all aluminum windows from that mid-century renovation. And we took all of those out of the 1904 building to go back with a proper historic window to the 1904 original building. So this is a rendering of the wedge that we had done during design and construction that shows that we are planning to replace that clock. We're planning to go back in with radiused insulated glass units here at the Flatiron, because that glass in 1904 would have been radiused. And then we've recreated and restored that entry at the corner. So both of these are rendered views on the second floor of the wedge, where the space is transformed to create a modern working environment that supports innovation. Um, the rendering on the right shows how we are able to, is taken in the sort of deepest, darkest part of that triangular set of buildings. And because it wasn't in the public portion of the building, the National Park Service allowed us to open up between the second and third floor, make another opening in the roof, and then pop up a volume onto the roof that allowed us to bring natural light down in to this part of the building and also provide access up to the new roof terraces. And the left-hand rendering shows a typical floor. This is the second floor, the co-working space. And then these are some diagrammatic floor plans. The vision is that an individual or small group can start out in the co-working space, creating their business. And as they grow, they can graduate into some of the smaller spec office spaces and then out into the greater Alton community. So you can see some of the tenants listed here so far. There's a partnership with Southern Illinois University. There's a venture capital firm, Steakhouse, that has space in the building, is going to be involved in sort of the incubator uh, environment for the entrepreneurs. And there's a Fortune 100 health data company that I can't mention more than that. But you can also see building amenities, like there's a gym, there's bike storage, there are locker rooms, there's shared kitchens, shared conferencing, shared sort of social spaces up on the fourth floor and on the roof. And one thing about the fourth floor, just of note, is that originally there was only one stair that went up to the fourth floor. So we, to meet code, needed to extend the south stair up to that fourth floor. We also extended the elevator up there, and we basically rebuilt all of these roofs on the fourth floor in order to support the weight of roof terraces and people being on the roofs, because these roofs that were built in 1904 and 1954 and those times weren't really even built to codes these days to meet like snow loads. So a lot of structural work had to be done to both open up the light court and also support the new roof amenities. These are a couple more renderings that were done of the space that show on the left a lounge space that overlooks the roof terrace and some meeting spaces in the background of the co-working. So now we're going to get into some photos that were taken in the past month. We are nearing the end of construction. The contractor is working on the punch list, and there are a few lagging items like the vitrolite facade that are taking a little longer, but the building is open, it's occupied, there are tenants. And from these photos, you can get an idea of of what's happening. So the photo on the left shows those curved insulated glass units in the upper floors at the Flatiron, the new clock, the door at the lower level still needs some paint and some missing hardware. And we still need some handrails installed. And they were out there. I was out there this morning and they were cleaning these columns and cleaning some of the stone and terracotta details. The upper right photo, you can see that we worked with Reed Burkett Lighting here in St. Louis on the exterior lighting. And you can see how this new lighting is really accentuating the beautiful brick coining and all of the details around the, the building. And you can see that restored mid-century retail facade here with vitroglass and and tile. So the subcontractor on the Vitrolite is Tim Dunn. He's a specialist that we're lucky actually lives in St. Louis. So the new facade is not pigmented structural glass, but it is back painted glass to replicate that. And he installs it, the same old way they did, and it's really looking good. It's a slow process, but it's going to be great when it's done. And then a lot of these photos are going to show sort of before and after. And on the left is an after photo of the lobby of the entry lobby of the Wedge building. This is all sort of mid-century. Back when this was built, the stair opened directly into the lobby with the elevator. And modern codes say that stair, which is being used as a fire stair to get out of the building, needs to be enclosed in a 2-hour rated enclosure. So at some point you can kind of see in this right-hand image, they had built a solid drywall partition here with a door, but that really chopped up the lobby and you weren't able to sort of understand the space as well as it was meant to be when it was built. So we took out that drywall partition and we put in a fiberglass partition. So that's 2-hour glass, which is like about 3 inches thick. Then here are some photos of before and after of the banking lobby. We had to take down the ceiling in the first floor in order to get a 2-hour separation between the retail level and the office level. So we had to take out all that ceiling and put in 2-hour drywall separation and then come back in with a new ceiling below that. So we had to recreate these domes and all but one of the lights were salvaged and St. Louis Antique Lighting restored those, and then they also fabricated a replica. So one of our games with people touring the building is like, can you find the replica light fixture? And it's very, very hard to tell. And then over to the right is the sort of north stair in the Wedge building where you can see the before and after. We took off the carpet that they'd covered over the stair treads with, and we restored the wood treads and landing, and we added glass pieces into the larger openings of the mid-century railing in order to help those come a little closer to meeting code as far as, you know, a kid not falling through them. And then the photo on the left is the south stair of the wedge with terrazzo treads that were all cleaned and restored. The light that you see, it's a lighted sign. You can see it in this before photo. And that was also taken to St. Louis Antique Lighting. They actually shortened this one because once we put in the new elevator and we put in the new fiberglass separation, that sign would no longer fit there. So they shortened it just a few inches so that it would still fit there, and restored it, relamped it, rewired it, and that's back in place. And then in the right-hand photos, you can see this is in the Weigler Hall building. And you can see sort of the before picture of this office space and how we transformed that into a shared kitchen area for the tenants. So more before and after photos. On the right is the co-working lounge on the 4th floor. This is the portion of the building that was added about 5 years after the Elfkin building was done. This was a very challenging floor or area because they had laid sleepers on top of the old roof and put in plywood subflooring, and then the steel bar joist, the bottom of joist was at 8 feet. So there was not a lot of room to play with in order to install mechanical systems. So for this level, the mechanical systems all had to be run across the roof and then brought down through thickened walls because we really couldn't put them in the ceiling. And then on the left shows an area of the wedge addition, sort of before and after, where, you know, throughout the building, we took out grid ceilings and put in gypboard ceilings that, you know, are more like would have been there originally with plaster. And these are additional photos in the original 1904 wedge building. So how that's been transformed. There was a lot of water damage in the building and a lot of, you know, subsequent alterations with like tenant over time. So peeling back a lot of layers of the onion. And then this is up on the 3rd floor in that sort of Flatiron area. These show before and afters of some of the stairs and corridors in the Elfkin building. So it was really, you know, cleaning up the green tile treads and landing, cleaning up the 1x1 mosaic tiles on the walls. We took out the 12x12 floor tile that you see in these all the photos here. That was not, you know, original to the 50s and was probably done after that 1989 fire. We took all of those out, and in the corridors, we used linoleum um, as it um, is sort of true to that time period. It also lays down a lot better given this really odd shaped building. You can see the tile that was there. Um, you get a lot of weird shapes and it at funny angles depending on, where it stops and starts. And linoleum was hit a lot of those weird angles. And then in the corridors, there was a historic sort of trim on the doors that was flush with the plaster. So, we retained these block walls that then had plaster above, and then the plaster sort of met up coplanar with a wood door trim that just sort of radiused into the door frame. So it's a very sort of subtle detail, but definitely one that we and the National Park Service wanted to retain. And because all of these doors were from the mid-century, they were not code compliant for modern widths. So all of the door openings had to be enlarged and those trims had to be recreated. And then this shows more of that light court. The before photo is middle bottom, and you can see it's just sort of a nondescript, dark sort of area of the building. And this is on the second floor. And then you can see what happens when we open up between the second and the third, and then poke up through the roof and create this skylight topped volume that we really transformed that space. And then finally up to the rooftop, where you can see it along the bottom before photos of that rooftop and then after photos. So you can see the block wall here in the bottom photo was stuccoed over and is much more attractive. And all of the new volumes on the roof are clad in zinc. So they sort of uh, they don't stand out against the sky, and they are differentiated from the historic parts of the building. And then we have 3 different levels that have the roof terrace and plantings that are all native perennials, um, and glass railings to sort of um, and we really concentrated a lot on the sight lines from the street up to the roof to make sure from different areas along the street you didn't have a good sight line to what was going on up here. It's sort of hidden. And then this just talks a little bit about our project team. When I was talking about the exterior lighting, I realized I left off our exterior lighting consultant, but that's Reed Burkett. So our historic consultant is Karen Bodie Baxter, structural engineer, KPFF, MEP FP Mazzetti, civil engineers, Mazzetti and Grimes Consulting. Our general contractor is BSI Constructors. And then, Kiko Obata and Company originated as a graphic design firm, and we still have a robust graphic design group. And so they did all the signage and graphics and marketing materials. Our sketches were done in-house. Our renderings were by OK Draw out of Portugal. And then our post-construction photos are Mike Sinclair. And that's it. I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have.
Thank you so much, Melissa. That was super interesting. And I don't, let's see there. Oh, there are two questions for you. Okay, first, and this is the same question that I was going to ask, unless I missed it at the beginning. Was the funding all public National Park Service funding? Was it a historic tax credit project? How was this project funded?
Yeah, so it was a mix. So there's historic tax credit funding. There is local and state funding, state historic tax credit funding. There's also um, private funding from John Simmons and his wife Jane. And I don't know. I can't off the top of my head remember the whole all the details of the sort of capital stack, but it's all in there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Including state, federal, local, and private.
Okay, thank you. Next, what was the total amount of the restoration? What is the total square footage of the buildings? To some,
So the total square footage of the buildings is around 60,000 square feet. And I think the project in total is around 33 million.
okay, thank you. And who can make thick custom glass?
Thick custom glass? Are we
Thick,
talking are we talking about the vitrolite or
I'm not
the
sure.
or like the radius insulated glass units?
He wanted you to repeat the name of the historic lighting company that you referenced.
Okay, the lighting company, yes. That is St. Louis Antique Lighting are the ones who restored all of our lights, and where we needed to duplicate lights were able to do that for us.
Okay, and then she may be also referencing the gentleman I believe you mentioned that is doing the lower.
The vitrolite,
Mhm.
that's Tim Dunn.
Tim Dunn. Okay, thank you. How many years has the restoration taken, and are the buildings all owned by public or private entities?
So the buildings are owned by private entities. Um, and the total construction timeline was about 2.5 years.
Thank you. Okay. Oh, and yes, for anybody watching, someone asked if you'll receive a copy of the recording to this. Yes, you will. It'll come to you in an email tomorrow. And once we're done, we'll be live on Preserve Arkansas's YouTube immediately. So if you want to go see it, if you want to go watch it again immediately after we're done, you can go do that. But you'll get a link to the recording tomorrow. Okay, we've got lots of nice comments. Oh, there's more. Oh, where is Tim Dunn? Is he also out of St. Louis?
Yeah, Tim Dunn is in St. Louis.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I've got a couple questions for you, and y'all continue to type things in if you've got more questions. What do you enjoy most about working with historic buildings versus a new construction project?
I think, with a new construction, you sort of know what you're going to get. When you're done with construction drawings, you're done with construction drawings. And CA, construction administration, is pretty straightforward. With a historic building, not only do you get to poke around in old buildings when they're, falling apart, and sort of imagine what they could be, but also construction administration is a real challenge because you discover all kinds of things once they start getting in there and doing demolition. And so you really have a very active construction administration process, where you're constantly trying to figure out, oh, that's not exactly what we expected, and what are we going to do? And you're working very closely with your structural engineers because once the building gets opened up, the structural engineer sees a lot of things that, like, oh, that's not good, and we need to fix that, and that's not exactly what we thought it was going to be. So we're just it's a more challenging, really getting in there and getting dirty kind of thing.
Thank you. I have another one, and you kind of covered this a little bit at the beginning, but you had an undergraduate degree in agriculture from ASU, but
Mm-hmm.
it sounds like you were already interested in architecture even as a child, but how did you
Yeah,
go
I
from
was interested in
agriculture to,
architecture as a child, but like when it was time for college, my parents were like, "So, you're gonna go to Arkansas State. What are you gonna do?" And I'm like, "Oh, I don't know." So yeah, I was an English and art education major for a while. I got a job at a vet's office and I thought maybe I wanted to be a veterinarian. So I started studying agriculture and animal science. And when it came time to take the VCAT exam for vet school, I was like, I sat my dad down and I was like, Dad, I don't think I want to be a vet. I think I want to be an architect. And so, you know, being from Arkansas, I went to University of Arkansas, not even really realizing that I should have been in a master's program because I already had a degree. But the better for it because I got a great education at University of Arkansas. I can't say enough about the professors I studied under and those relationships that I still have. So, yeah, I mentioned earlier, my dad says that we're slow learners. It just takes us a while to get where we're going.
let's see, there's somebody else. Somebody asking if you mind sharing your contact information if we have questions after we view the recording.
Sure. Um, is that something that you would want to share, Rachel, or how do
I
we
would
want to
be,
share that?
I'd be glad to, or if you just want to copy or type your work email or
Yeah,
whoever
I'll
you
type that in
prefer
down here too.
in the chat, then they can see it and that the chat will be available as part of the recording, y'all.
If I can spell correctly. There we go. It's in the chat.
It went only to, let me
Oh,
put it's all good. Put it for everyone real quick.
okay.
There. Okay, now everybody has your email. Okay, one last question. How do you mitigate the funky smells that are sometimes common to older buildings?
Oh, well, that's interesting. Yeah, you go into these old buildings and, these buildings had a lot of water issues. And, that it smelled funky. It smelled musty and dirty. I think construction takes care of that. So they take out all of the old, musty, dirty drywall and things like that. And once those things have been out of there for 2 years and construction's been going on for 2 years, it smells brand new.
Yes, after all was that project, did it involve a lot of abatement issues or was it just,
Yeah, so there was asbestos abatement, lead abatement, yeah, mold, the whole gamut. There was, funky things that had to be pumped out of the elevator pits and yeah.
hmm. Okay. I don't see any other questions. So I just want to thank you again for speaking to us. We really appreciate it. That you did an excellent job and everyone
Thanks
else
for
did
having
too.
me.
And thank you all for watching. We'll see you next month. And